Hi everyone, my name is Janet. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Maryland where I studied computer science, and I had the opportunity to be a software engineering fellow for Coding It Forward, working with the Department of Human Services in DC to streamline benefit access through robotic process automation. Over the last 10 weeks, I worked closely with the Office of Information Systems, or the OIS, where they're responsible for managing, overseeing, and supporting all activities of the agency and making sure that it aligns with the mission of DHS. And the OIS helps the DHS execute this mission through information technology. There was a really big need for automation and reducing manual tasks. And so I had the opportunity to build two automation projects from scratch. My first project was to gather relevant and necessary data to help a larger ongoing initiative to prevent or flag potential duplicate people for benefits. And my second project was to send interview notices about SNAP benefit recertification to a certain group of individuals. Before we jump into all the details about the automations, I want to first define automation. I did something called robotic process automation, or RPA. And that's basically just creating a robot that mimics human actions, sort of like a digital assistant. It's important to discern that RPA is not AI because it doesn't have its own decision-making capabilities or ability to form independent logic. So it's more process-driven rather than data-driven. And it's really best used for repetitive rule-based tasks where there are predefined sets of rules or steps it can follow. The first automation I worked on is called Task Detail Reports, or TDR, and this was built to support the larger ongoing initiative called Sensing that's dedicated to finding and flagging any duplications. The need behind this project was the ongoing project Sensing needed a way to grab relevant data daily to actually do the search and check for duplicates. But there wasn't any automatic or systematic way to grab these relevant cases or go through our task management system, which meant that there was no kickoff for the next step. And so finding a solution would streamline case processing, both in the process of searching for any duplications and making sure that we were actually going to get these cases smoothly. It also smoothens the experience for developers who are working on this ongoing initiative. So that way they can focus on actually managing and mitigating instances where there might be duplicate people in the benefits and making sure that we're managing them correctly. And they don't have to focus on how exactly they're going to get this data or scrape our task management application to obtain this data. So it also creates a reliable method of data extraction. My second automation is part of Notice of Interview process, or NoIP. The need behind this project is that there was a lot of staff that had to go through a very repetitive 35 plus step process to send a single interview notice to a certain or one in SNAP recipient. And then this process would have to repeat for however many SNAP recipients they were who needed an interview notice. And again, similar to the previous one, there was no automatic or systematic way of grabbing these cases or SNAP recipients who would need an interview notice. And so finding a way to mitigate this would first lessen the time staff spend going through the queue, and also lessen the amount of time benefit recipients have to wait in the queue. So it kicks off the recertification process faster for both parties. 10% of DC residents are approximately 10% of DC residents are SNAP recipients. So again, kicking this off really fast would help this portion of the population actually get their benefits. And subsequently, caseworkers can also focus on reviewing these requests and or more complex cases rather than, repeating this step process to send a single interview notice. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process and outcomes, starting with the details, like how the automation might look underneath the hood. This is what the task detail reports automation kind of looks like underneath the automation pipeline. I'm using a tool called Microsoft Power Automate Desktop, which is an RPA platform that allows us to create these digital assistants I mentioned earlier. So first, our bot is going to go into Current, which is our task management application that handles all the submitted cases and caseload management. In here, our bot will select the filters and requirements that we're looking for, so that way we get a specific group of cases. And then once we have that downloaded, we need to send it to the ongoing initiative sensing, where it will need to pull from a different location to actually conduct the search and process for any potential duplicates. In order to bridge this gap, we need to think about security because there is so much personal information that's being handled from Current. We wanted to make sure that we would also securely handle this transportation process. We tried a different couple methods, but eventually landed on something called PGP encryption, which just is an encryption method that scrambles the contents so that while the file is in transport, should there be any mishaps, it won't be readable, and only the designated sender and receiver will have the key to actually decrypt and read its contents. The notice of interview process also follows a very similar pipeline as the previous one. Our bot will first go into Current, our task management application, and again, select the corresponding filters and requirements that we're looking for. And then once we have that, we're going to open it up in Excel and filter it even further so that we have a really narrowed scope of individuals who have the highest chances of being eligible for an interview notice. And then taking this queue, our bot is going to go through each line in the list and go to DCAS, our eligibility application, where it will then make the determination of whether or not an individual needs an interview notice, and then actually sending one if they do need one. The biggest challenge for this part was trying to mimic the human thinking and logic needed behind the criteria evaluation. Like I mentioned earlier, RPA doesn't have its own decision-making capabilities. So it's very similar to as if you would ask a robot to make you a PB&J sandwich, but it completely lacks all of the quote unquote common sense that we have. So you have to start off by specifying like what kinds of utensils to use, how many slices of bread to use, and like the order of all of that. So we had to follow a very similar structure in DCAS, or like when we're formulating the logic behind the DCAS evaluation process, to make sure that we're actually modeling the patterns and quote unquote thinking that is needed to make the correct determination. This leads me to the outcomes. For staff, it increases efficiency overall and minimizes overhead. For sensing, for example, it'll save time around 5 minutes per case if we get once sensing is successfully deployed. And again, it also minimizes repetitive tasks and requirements in the notice of interview process. Staff don't have to go through that 35+ step process as much. It'll be truncated enough where they can run it in the background. And so staff can shift their focus to more complex technical problems or fulfilling other more complex needs. It'll also improve review timelines, again, kicking off the recertification process faster, and just helping the project move forward and the larger initiative to move forward and actually do the more important parts of searching and managing duplications. And it also provides cohesive maintenance. Everything is on one platform, Power Automate Desktop. So any future revisions or edits can all be done there. And it's much easier than having to manage 2 or 3 different applications and trying to update them all at the same time if there needs to be any. Although they haven't been deployed yet for benefit recipients, hopefully this will mean that they receive recertification notices faster and they're able to access their benefits faster because they're spending less time being processed in the queue and waiting in the queue. And so similarly, ideally, they'd be able to convene quicker with caseworkers to fulfill requirements or ask any questions. And it'll also hopefully prevent confusion for staff that are going through benefits and minimize any potential benefit distribution errors should there be any duplications in the system. I definitely learned a lot for the last 10 weeks. These were the 4 that kind of popped up in my head at the forefront. Really asking questions and getting clarifications to help support kind of thinking outside of the box and thinking about how we can combine the resources we have to make the solutions that we're looking for, and making sure that once we have these clarifications, the testing process reflects these needs and the stakeholders' interests, and that the feedback we get from testing and making sure our security is robust actually provides useful feedback that we can then practically use to note any current limitations or future revisions that have to be made. And also just the general emphasis on interdisciplinary teams and working in an interdisciplinary team. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but instead you should think about how we can spread across the needs and fulfill them accordingly. And also, I was just really reminded about the impact of technology on our communities. Again, 10% of DC residents are SNAP recipients. And so having this technology would be directly impacting a very significant portion of the DC resident population. So it was just really fulfilling and a great reminder of how much we can use technology for good. And that wraps up my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. And a very special thanks to the CIF team, Yasser, Adrian, and Ermias for their support. I'll open up the floor to any questions or comments or feedback now. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see the chat if there's any questions there. I see one in the chat. It says, I might have missed, but is the idea that all SSRs would create this flow, or is that, or that it's done for everyone in the background somehow? I don't have too much knowledge on what SSRs mean, what that acronym means, but assuming that this question.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon. This is Yasser from DC, and this is a process that would run in the background.
Yeah, this automation, the goal of this automation is that it's kind of like a one size fits all for everyone or the staff that need it. So it should be running in the background and doing its like scheduled job so that when the staff come back, they have the necessary information that they need to move on to the next process.
This is Ermias Waldo from DC government as well. I just wanted to quickly note that Janet did such an incredible work. So just a quick background on sensing. We had a partnership for about 2 years with Code for America to build a sensing platform, but right at the end, we had a huge gap on implementing this. And if Janet had not come through, this would have been all 2 years plus of work would have been potentially lost. And that really does a lot for us. And Janet, when she said, "Oh, it's saving us 5 minutes," those 5 minutes make a huge difference to us. Our current timeliness is about 85%. The federal requirement is 95%. So being able to save those 5 minutes really does make a huge positive to serving our benefits. 10% of our SNAP benefits, 35% of our Medicaid benefits. So it's not like, I don't want just to simplify our numbers. Like, these are like some things that are like fundamentally going to change our agency and the way we do things and get the people faster to the grocery stores to get food. So we're really appreciative of the work we've done. The work Jan has done. Sorry, not, it's all her.
Thanks, Elias. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
I'm not sure how much time I have left, but again, I really appreciate everyone coming and coming to listen, and I hope you learned a little bit about RPA today and what it could potentially do. This was just overall a really fulfilling experience. Again, just a great reminder on how much we can use tech for good. I feel like we've all seen a very large surplus in news articles these days about what AI is doing and how technology is changing so many fronts of work. So I think it's great that there's so many channels that we can use it to improve existing systems and really help our communities and reinvest in what we do for them.